Yeah.
All right.
Well, that was good.
Christian AI.
Christian AI. Oh, man. Artificial intelligence. All right. We should probably define...
I was going to say...
Let's define two things.
Yeah, okay.
First, what do we mean by Christian, and what do we mean by artificial intelligence?
And where are we going with this?
I would say... I would say probably the first and most important thing is to define artificial intelligence. Because I think you and I both have an understanding of what it really means to be a Christian.
Yep.
But I don't think that a machine can be sentient and conscious like a human being can be sentient and conscious.
That would, way back whenever I mentioned this earlier, that would have been my exact thing. It's
So
the idea of sentientness for a machine.
But
Yep. All right.
with that said,
Yep.
just as machines can be useful in their computational complexity, in other words, the way in which they can compute things much faster. Like a computer can beat any human being in a multiplication test any day of the week.
Sure.
Right? What other things about the human experience can we model on a computer? Not just multiplication, right? But maybe the generation of art. We have AI generated art at this point. What about things like making literature? What about things like
machine writing a book, machine
exactly.
Creating a machine drawing a cartoon movie?
What are the limits of what a machine could be able to do?
Sure.
Whether we say that machine is conscious or not.
But now hold on.
Question.
Are you debating what we can? Because in my mind, AI is defined. Like back to trying to define this. AI is basically a self-conscious computer.
Well, that's what AGI would be. Artificial general intelligence is something that has the capacity for generalizability within a given task.
I get what you're saying, but what I meant to clarify though is that what you're talking about, can I make a computer write a book or a story?
Yeah. Is different question than is the computer writing the book conscious?
Yeah. Well, is it
conscious like us?
Is it doing it out of its own will? Did the computer? Does a computer? Can a computer have a will?
We're open on camera,
right? right? No, for example, right?
I love this.
If I kick off if I have all the computing power I need to run AI and whatnot, just say we got everything we need to do, and then I just set it there. I just kick it off. The machine deciding that it needs to write a story.
Okay, yeah. So
right, and I'm just saying, like, so what are we saying by AI? Because you saying, can I make a computer write a story? I think, the answer is yes. I can give some parameters. I can come up with some models, come up with some algorithms. But okay, here's how you create a story: antagonist, protagonist, blah 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 blah. Put some creative models in there, blah blah blah. Writes a story. Versus a computer sitting and be like, I'm gonna write a book. Yeah, I'm gonna write a book about this thing that I know because I'm a computer
and I'm interested. yeah. Well, I think one of the things we have to ask then is like,
I want to ask, what
is will? What do you mean by free will? Because this is the question. Then.
Because this could all go deep. So where are we trying to go?
Okay. Yeah. I would want to go to define what artificial intelligence is. What I personally mean by that.
Okay.
Right.
All right.
How that differs from your.
What is your
definition.
hermeneutical right?
Yeah. What's your interpretation?
What's your interpretation?
What's your interpretation of what artificial intelligence is?
Yep.
Then how do we apply that to what artificial intelligence could do potentially?
Okay.
And then the implications then if artificial intelligence as we defined it, right, is X, Y, and Z, and it can do all these various tasks. Now, what does that mean for the state of consciousness? What does that mean for free will? What does that mean for all these questions come in? How does it differ from human beings?
So based on what you just said, though, you want to have a line of thinking that's a little different than the whole like, can a machine write a book? You want to go more the line of can a machine? What does it mean? What does it mean? Is it possible, or what does it mean to have a machine that wants to write a book?
Yeah, and there's yeah.
So like also like I could come up like again going back to like if I kick off this computer and all right so. I could model will, like just the idea of will, like that this computer is just going to decide to do something. I could model will through what's called. Let me just go. Let me show you that. I would think that I could model will to a degree in a computer, such that like back to the Turing test, right? So I think we really should discuss the Turing test, right?
Okay. Oh yeah.
So the Turing test in regards to
all right. First, Alan Turing, right? One of the most brilliant computer scientists of the 20th century. He was one of the foremost workers. He cracked the Enigma code, which allowed for the Allied forces to help defeat Germany. Very brilliant man, very tragic, sad story, worth looking into if you're interested. But nonetheless, Alan Turing wrote about computation, and he wrote about what the relationship between computation and consciousness would be, right? And one of the things that came out of this was a Turing test, where he said, right, the test if a machine would be conscious, it would be something like if it fooled a human being into believing that it was conscious.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, so there's a movie, Ex Machina, out there with many. I don't know if I can fully recommend it in terms of like, there's some sexual immorality stuff in it. So
slight disclaimer.
Yeah.
necessarily the most wholesome movie
Exactly.
in the way it depicts the content,
Yes.
but nonetheless embodies certain ideas that we're getting
In
at.
which case, in the movie, by the way, spoiler alert.
Oh, yeah.
Total spoiler alert. The whole point of the movie is basically there's a robot that this guy creates,
Yeah.
and it's an AI robot, and it looks like a human. And the goal is to see if it can fool the other human into thinking it's a human, basically.
Yeah. And it's all about that. And there's some crazy twists in it. I think it's a cool
Right.
movie.
So to finish that line
Yeah.
of thinking with what I was saying in regards to, so I'm going to build a computer, I'm going to throw it over in the corner, and we're going to try to make it look human. So basically,
Yeah.
the idea of like making it look like it has a will.
And it's
So the way I could do that, there's this thing in computers, and this is a very naive, like someone out there who's really smart on this stuff would probably, there's so many better ways to do this. I'm naive, but I have some computer engineering background. So there's there's interrupts on computers.
Yep.
Basically, it's just like it just fires off on a clock, right?
Okay.
So you could have some type of will-driven interrupt service,
Yeah.
which is just like, it's just running on interrupts, and there's some type of software architecture paradigm as to what this computer's will is,
Yeah.
things that it could do, maybe would want to do, and then obviously this gets really complicated in terms of like, well, maybe it's particularly processing something for some reason,
So-
and it could over there because of that process decide to write a book.
Yeah.
A book may come out because it was sitting over there by itself. This interrupt routine's running.
Yeah.
It's just firing off, and all of a sudden it's like book comes out.
So one of the things that's interesting in this is that, so you asked the question about will,
Mm-hmm.
right? Did it will for something to be? Now, could you program something like randomness and chaos
Yep.
into a machine?
Yep.
So
Yep.
that would mean then
Yes, you
that something like a will, right? If you ask, does it have free will, right? Is it purely determined? We would say yes and no. We would say, is it purely determined?
Well,
yes.
I want to make sure to clarify.
Okay.
I feel like we need to clarify something first of all. Like
Okay.
I think as Christians especially, we have to agree that a machine cannot sin.
Yes.
A machine
A
is not
machine cannot sin.
A
It
machine
doesn't
is-
have a moral code.
It's not a moral being. It cannot commit
If
sin.
anything, the machine that is constructed by human beings and whatever that machine does, whether it's for good or for ill, is then the responsibility of the human beings that created it.
Yes, exactly.
Right? They are the ones who have sinned before God if that machine does something sinful.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so to then, in terms of this discussion, I want to clarify what are we actually asking? Because in my mind, a will is defined by the ability to be a moral being.
Yeah. And
And so like if you sin against God, you have willed yourself against
Yeah.
His will, right?
Sure.
And oftentimes that results in an action, but sometimes it's like lusting or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
and there's not really an action for it sometimes, right? It's a moral thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so a machine could never be that.
Yeah. And that's without getting bogged down in the complexity of what moral will is.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk more generally about whether or not a machine, what does it mean for a machine to kind of operate, quote unquote, on its own terms?
Sure. Yep. Okay.
Right.
Well, and also like you wanted this whole conversation. You had something about Christianity and AI. Like, was there a target you wanted to get to with all this?
Sometimes I'll make the joke that I just want to create Christian AI, right? Because somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to create,
What does that mean?
More
Like
specifically.
just a computer that you
Yeah.
programmed over in the corner that's going to tell people to follow Jesus, like
Well,
like Cortana from like Halo. That's just like, by the way, follow Christ.
Yeah. More specifically, AGI, Artificial General Intelligence, which is a much more, not much,
So a
but
seemingly sentient computer that's out there operating and acting, deciding and moving and whatever
Yes.
on its,
A
out of its
computer-
own autonomy.
what I'm talking about is ultimately it's super intelligence, right? Like, so you and I we can do mathematics, but we can't necessarily do mathematics.
Sorry, I just thought of a really interesting place we can take this, but keep going.
Okay. Bookmark it, right?
Yes,
So
yeah.
you and I can do mathematics, but we can't do mathematics as fast as a computer does.
Sure, yep.
Now, this is what's beautiful, is that you and I can do mathematics
Yep.
as fast as a computer. If we build a computer, we use the computer, right? We're doing
Oh,
the
you're saying
mathematics,
because we're
but it's just an extension
right? Yeah,
of our
the
intelligence.
computer knows the mathematics,
Yes,
and then
and then I'm using the computer, right?
Yep.
It's an extension of our intelligence.
Yep.
What I think, and
it's almost like, for example, I don't know if anyone's ever heard of like the program or software called MATLAB.
okay, yeah.
So it's basically
Yeah.
really advanced computer software that, like, you know, in college or in high school or college, you're
allows
like,
you to program for mathematics, and
right. So
Yeah.
in school, you're like, oh, I learned all this calculus, and then I don't use it now. Like literally, like I go to MATLAB, and I'm like, MATLAB, do derivative. And
Yeah.
MATLAB does the derivative, right? And so you
Yeah.
can teach computers these fundamentals of mathematics and whatnot. And so you're saying basically, I don't have to think as fast.
we
as
can
you do.
outsource our intelligence.
Yeah, we outsource
right?
our
So,
intelligence.
and outsource our effectiveness, right? Like
Yeah.
instead of walking, people began to use horses. Instead of using horses, eventually they began to use cars, and then
Right.
planes and jets, right?
Right.
We're able to make more effective use of what we otherwise want to do by leveraging technology. So when I think of Christian artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
what I'm thinking about is a supercomputer that is able to effectively implement various
solves poverty.
various parts. Well, in a way that it could be used for something like that. But
Sure.
what I'm ultimately talking about is
But like, does it go out and autonomously start solving poverty? Like, does it little poverty robots?
Well, I think that would be kind of cool. Is that if you were to be able to, what Roombas?
Yeah.
Those things that like kind of
cats ride on them. Great cat toys.
Yeah. They just kind of like drive around and pick stuff up, right? Are those autonomous beings, right? In a way, they are because they like I don't have any predictive power to be able to say whether or not my Roomba is going to go over here or over there, unless I were to like really go complex and sketch it out. It looks to me like it's doing it on its own, but of course we know that there's a computer program that underlies this thing. But it's otherwise very useful because the chaotic nature of where it moves around and goes helps get as much space as possible. Now, of course, there's probably some reasonable computer program that was implemented so that it would get a majority of the space, but nonetheless, to a human observer, it looks chaotic. So what we would say is something like if a computer were to go out, right, say some supercomputer with like that's embodied, right, it's got a body, it can go out and like affect things in the world. If it begins to go out and help people with poverty, it would look like to other people, oh, that computer is just doing it out of the goodness of its circuits. And to some people it would look like that, but the truth is that it was actually programmed to help alleviate human suffering. Or it goes out and it's programmed. Its fundamental program is to help human beings. But obviously there's a can of worms that goes into that because what does it mean to help human beings? You'd have to define that so rigorously.
So here's what you're trying to clear. But again, this goes back to the original clarification question I tried to ask. Are you simply programming a computer with a database in architecture paradigm and tools and everything to know what helping means and go do it? Like write a book.
Sure.
And then it has some cue for why it's going to write a book because it meets a human or is put in a situation like that can help. Or are you wanting to create a computer that decides in some way that it thinks it's helping?
Yeah. Well, that's
for example,
super
to
funny
go back
thing.
to a conversation we had earlier that wasn't so that we had.
Yeah.
It would be a computer showing up and deciding I'm going to help, and
what
I'm going to do.
Well,
is going
it's
to
something
help.
like help human beings, and then it like blows up a bunch of factories with high fructose corn syrup because it's like high fructose corn syrup kills lots of people.
I read Wikipedia, so many people die.
Yeah, and it's like I did the statistics, and if 3.6 billion people were to die right now, right, boom, like
that's
power
like
plants.
the movie Eagle Eye.
Yeah. And I think that I love some of those movies. And those
Spoiler
kind of
alert. We have a lot of spoiler alerts on this.
Yeah. Well, I think I like some of those questions and how they get expressed in like sci-fi fantasy and stuff, because what they're really doing is they're taking this abstracted concept and then they're able to like run program what would happen in the world and then build the story to communicate.
So let me take what you've wanted to do and try to apply it, and this maybe will get very interestingly theologically philosophical. So in regards to being able to create a machine that doesn't have to ask what is good.
Okay.
We're saying we create them and we program because
it's a presupposition. It's an axiom
we
of the
tell
machine's
it what
function.
we tell it what is good
as rigorously as we possibly can, according to even the ambiguous ethics of Christianity.
So here's my question: is it ethical then in the future to create machine cops or machine law and order, which has been programmed with a certain set of instructions and things of that nature, so that you could get pulled over on the highway by a computer cop?
Why would you need it? Why would you need to get pulled over by a computer cop? Why wouldn't it just be like, if we had that sophisticated technology, why would we need to make a cop gets out of car and like doosh comes up when we could just be immediately credit card gets billed for speeding? You know what I mean?
Well, because the whole point, this is the whole point. What is the point of authority? What is the point of laws and rules, right?
Sure.
And so the reason that you getting pulled over by a cop and it being another human being, I would argue has a component to it of God's design and creation, that we humans self-govern, we police one another, we enact God's laws and all that type of stuff. So when you get pulled over by a cop, there's an incentive, like you feel it, like you feel a gut check and you're like, oh, like another human being that is in a place of authority has just pulled me over, is giving me a ticket, and now I'm not going to speed when I drive away because it was
you understand that you were punished for the wrongdoing that you committed.
But I'm arguing that there is some, I'm thinking that there's something to be thought of or discussed in the fact that it's a human versus a robot.
Okay.
Because if you got pulled, I think the experience of getting a speeding ticket would be very different if it was just a machine cop
Yeah,
pulling
machine
you
cop.
over to, because it's not just like, you're right, like
RoboCop.
because,
We
like,
need a blend between the two.
well, right, no, 'cause, like,
That's literally RoboCop,
for,
dude.
for example, your whole thing, like, well, we would just scan the plate and give a ticket. Well, that's not the point of the law. The point of the law is to stop, like, having
Deter
the
people.
authority is to deter it.
Yeah, but
just getting scanned.
Yeah, but couldn't
Oh,
the financial burden be the deterrent opposed to the interaction and the
Right, so
uncomfortability
you're
of
yeah.
being?
So you're saying, like, just line everything with sensors and cameras so that, like, if you go more than
Dude,
5 miles
okay.
over wherever you're at, you're gonna get it.
If we had the complexity to do something like,
Isn't that only with driving?
sure,
Domestic-
I took that example. Yeah.
What
we
about a domestic, like...
domestic disturbance.
Yeah.
I think that it
You
would
could
be-
program a RoboCop with
You'd
a
have to
certain
you'd have to
set-
ask two questions, right? What is the end of the situation, right? What is the end goal of what we're trying to do, right? So domestic disturbance. What's the goal? Is it to the complexity that emerges?
We need
from
an officer here. We need one of our friends here.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good question in that.
Well, because, like,
what
I mean,
you have
part
to
of it
do-
is to stop the disturbance.
Yeah.
Again, back to Romans 13, the job of authorities is
Yeah.
to be a terror to evil doers.
Yeah.
So, is it here's we got a lot going on here, but I want to make sure I ask the real question, which I think
This
it
is an ethical question. Ultimately,
The ethical question is it morally ethical by Christian standards and God's code of law, whatever, that we would police one another with robots and machines?
As a thought experiment, I would say yes. Is it would be practically implemented? My kind of fear is that those that get to program the robots get to dictate its ethical values. And if you had a big robo army enforcing law, it would lend itself very quickly to the temptation of those in authority towards totalitarianism and an authoritarian government structure. So my hesitation is that we ought not to do that to even provide the opportunity. Like, it would be like something, should we make nuclear bombs? Probably not. Should we leverage nuclear fission for power?
I think there's more of an argument to be made. Like, so for example, you take blue light cams, right?
Okay.
New York was like, oh, if you run this red light, no one's here, but we got you on camera, then you get ticketed.
Yeah.
So there's no, you're not. It's a machine. There's no human involved in that other than you breaking the law, right?
Sure.
So here's another hypothetical question, right? And I think you have to separate yourself from reality to ask it a little bit.
All right.
In regards to if you.
I'm already separated from reality.
If you
Happened a long time ago.
let me see if I get this right, because I thought this was really interesting. I had this debate with somebody one time. So if you walk across, so say you come to a new land. Let's just say you go to a new land. You go to a new country and you come across a sign that says no running. Mm-hmm. Do you obey the sign?
Do I need to run in that moment?
If
I'm walking.
Say walking. Forget the need to run or whatnot, but say you were walking and there's a sign that says no walking.
I think I would fit it into my ethical framework as to what is more important. Is it to obey the current authorities?
Stop. You already went too far.
Or is it to...
you went too far.
Why?
Because I said there's a sign in the desert that says no walking. Mm-hmm. Do you obey the sign or not?
Well, I'd have to have a priority in ethical systems, right? If there's no reason why I need to run, if there's no reason why
walking, just walk.
Yeah. If there's no reason why I need to walk there, then I shouldn't. But if there's a reason, right, and that is more important than obeying that sign, then I would walk there. Yes.
So if that sign was put there by a generation in the land that's dead and gone,
sure.
Do you still obey the sign?
Probably not.
Why not?
Because the authority structure that was instituted no longer exists, and the benefit and the reasoning behind placing the sign there in the first place no longer has a bearing on why people should or should not obey the sign.
Right. So so it's an authority.
Sure.
Rules are not.
Which is why
rules do not exist simply for the sake of rules existing.
Now, this is why I say Christian AI, because what I would hope is that instead of there being merely a human ethical system, right, that you could program this kind of transcendent ethic, like in the same way.
Okay, but so
hear me out with this.
Well, let me finish my analogy and tie that up, and then dig into that.
Okay.
Just because what I was going to say is that, like, a law only has merit if there's an authority over it.
Sure.
Like, if there's if the generation's gone, like you said, the authority's gone, then the authority has to be there in order to enforce the law.
Yeah.
In my argument, we humans, under liberty and under God, we police one another. It's a community it's governing one another. So if there's no authority there to enforce a law, like
Yeah.
like
Well,
if I happen to run a red light by accident or whatever, like I know I broke the law, like I shouldn't have done that, and the law there is an authority structure around that is around to enforce it theoretically, but they weren't there to enforce that law, and I did it.
But that's different than should you break the law?
No. I'm arguing
did you
because
accidentally break
the
law?
question that I'm asking is should technology be used as an appropriate authority to enforce laws that are broken? Because you were
Perhaps,
arguing,
yeah.
you were, and that's go back to the RoboCop, goes back to the sensors.
Yeah, it's
I'm
the
saying
extent to which technology would be implemented in the enforcement of laws. So would it be like captured bad guy,
Right, 'cause-
put him on trial before a jury of his peers now?
Well,
right?
no, or for
Versus,
example, like tax fraud, right? Like
Sure.
in order for someone to get busted for tax fraud, a human being has to collect data, look through it, all this type of stuff, and make a decision that we got to go after him for tax fraud.
Yeah.
Because of all the numbers in the data sheets, right? Your argument is that well, we could build a supercomputer fast enough that would just be able to go out there, get all the data, and be like, everyone's guilty of tax. All these, look, I found all the people in the country that are
sure.
guilty of tax fraud.
Let me ask you this though:
I
is that a good thing? Would that be a good thing?
I think it'd be a good thing if they peer review it, like a human.
Yeah, it's got to be like approved by kind of human agent or something like that. So you limit the enforceability of a machine's conclusions.
I think that was a problem with red light cameras,
Sure.
where like they would get you and you had to pay it, but there's no peer review. Mm-hmm. That was like an
but
issue
that's the argument of technology. You don't have. Why do you have to peer review if I got a photo of you?
because technology is fallible.
Fallible.
code.
Yeah.
So that's a separate argument. You're arguing because of the fallibility. You're saying, yeah. So you're saying.
So
that,
what if a
you're
machine
saying,
makes a mistake?
Well, yeah, you're saying
Versus-
if a machine makes a mistake, that's why there needs to be like humans involved and whatnot.
Right.
I guess I'm
He's
I'm
arguing-
questioning more of the fact of like should you even like I'm asking would it be good if we could create a supercomputer that could go out and just find all the tax fraud right now?
I think personally, right? That
I don't know why I wouldn't say yes to that, but I'm thinking.
And this is the only reason I would say no to it would be that if so, I think as a thought experiment, right? It's an immediate yes because obviously anything that's good, right? Namely, like the enforcement of a law by an instituted
Okay,
authority,
keep going,
right?
yeah, keep going,
that
keep
doesn't
going. All right.
violate God's
I think I
laws.
got it. All right.
That's a good thing.
Yep.
Now, there's a possibility that could not be enforced properly by the humans that implement it, right? So the human beings might just start extorting people, right? By finding them.
Right.
for-
Oh yeah. Exactly. Now I see.
And I
everyone's got
think that's
fraud.
wrong.
I'm gonna go out
but,
and be like,
but then all of a sudden, what we're saying is the machine's not doing a good thing anymore. So therefore, it should be stopped.
well, but
It's
that's
actually
no,
using
but that's
it's
the thing.
doing
The
a bad
machines
thing.
don't do good. They're not moral beings.
I'm saying the machine is not being used for a good thing anymore.
Right. But again, a machine is just a tool.
That's why I said it's
Yeah.
not being used by a human being for a good thing anymore.
Right, but
And
hold on,
that
but hold
if
on,
it's being
hold on.
used
So like
for-
in your case of like a sensors giving people speeding tickets, there's no human ever. Right? That's what his argument, right? No one
Sure.
there's no human ever. It's just that was his argument.
Yeah.
If you take the photo, they say that you went through a red light, then you get a ticket.
Yeah.
And that is definitely part of my argument. Is that
So
like,
what? And so this was my.
and I would on top of this, and the reason that that's so important is because we believe in justice that knows what grace and mercy is.
Sure.
Machine enforcement
Can you program
does
that?
not.
Can you program that?
No,
No.
you cannot program grace and mercy.
Just
Grace and mercy is human to human.
yeah. Okay.
So that would be my argument. Is that there,
I'm
and
not-
that's why like you speed by a cop. Like how many people speed by a cop every day? And and everyone will say, well, they don't pull everyone over because they could never possibly enforce that. I think that's missing the principle.
Sure. Yeah.
I think
so just a quick side tangent. I think this is going to be important because it's going to bring in some ideas, right? One of the things is that I listened to a great Ask Pastor John about this. John Piper is like, should Christians obey the speed limit? And you want to know what conclusion he comes to?
Yes.
Yes, of course. You're supposed to obey the
he would
obey
agree.
the speed limit.
Okay.
But wait.
The authorities.
What
don't-
if-
the authorities don't enforce that though? So
What?
is it really a law if they're not enforcing it?
Wait. Let me get.
Like
that.
I've
Hang on.
had an officer tell me that if you do not go over a certain number, well, I have to be careful saying this. Probably if you do not go a certain mile per hour over the speed limit, they will not pull you over.
Sure.
So by my point, the law existing there, if the authority's not enforcing it, is it really the law?
So this is what I'm trying to get at.
Because
right?
like God enforces His law, He gives us grace and mercy.
Well, this is what I'm trying to get at, Rich. Let me get at it, okay? Look at What is the most transcendent authority that there is? Why do we obey the speed limit when there's no cop to pull us over? Because even if there's no cop to pull us over, we are accountable to a transcendent authority,
Sure.
namely the God who is omniscient, omnipresent, and omnipotent,
Yeah.
and looking at all
Yeah,
times.
yeah.
So if I choose, so this is the question: if I commit tax fraud and I know I'm not going to get caught, should I do it or not? No. Well, there's no authority to enforce it by your reasoning, so I would have no reason to commit tax fraud.
What I would argue is that in tax. Okay, keep going.
But because I know that God is looking, right? I know that God is aware of my immorality, then I ought not to do it. So, is it possible that you can have a situation where a machine that enforces the law does so in a manner that is congruent with a transcendent authority, namely an authority that is not established by the transient human laws, right? Laws that come in and out of being,
Right,
that,
'cause that's what I was gonna say, like
that are impermanent. They're not eternal, right? Could you program into a computer something like natural rights, something like the value of human life is to be upheld over almost anything else, namely something like speed limits. So, do I obey the speed limit? Okay, there's a cop that's on the thruway, and my son is dying in the back, right?
Yep.
I would speed in front of that cop, and guess
Yep.
what?
Pregnant,
I wouldn't care.
Pregnant wife, whatever.
Yeah, I wouldn't care. And that cop would understand that there's a higher principle at play here.
Yep.
So is it possible to have this kind of hierarchy and stratification
Well, but
of the ethics and morality?
this goes
implemented?
back. This goes back to your original. You were giving an example where the cops show up to a domestic dispute, and then
Sure.
you're talking about a machine being able to like solve a domestic dispute. Here's what I. So this is. I think I'm at your level of questioning here. Is the question is what you would have to do is you would have to be able to program a machine to think wisely.
Yes.
Because
That's what I'm trying
because
Yeah.
there are many more, like if this is a table, like this table, if off the table, this is a Doug Wilson analogy.
Sure.
If this table is like being within God's law, and then off the table is out of God's law. So
Sure.
this is sin. Like
Yeah.
over here is sin, on here you are not sinning. This table's still really big.
Mm-hmm.
There's still a lot you can do on this table that is wise or unwise.
It's more like this is like a cheese grater, and that there's a lot of holes all through it.
Yeah.
And you can fall through. You're on the big square plane, but there's holes everywhere. And you can fall through it anyway.
Well, no,
I
because
just say that
a
in
hole
that-
would put you outside. You're arguing, like, at least to complete the analogy, we're saying
Yeah.
off the table is you're in sin somehow.
Yeah.
So if you're
Off
saying you
the
could fall
cheese,
through a
right.
hole, you're right. If you could fall through a hole, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
not
just the
like, all right,
complexity of it.
Yeah. But point.
You're
all right.
still off the cheese grater. It's just so happens that you're not like
Right, it's not-
way over there. You're actually just falling into something that
Right, I got
you're
you.
acting
Yep.
unwise and sinfully within
Right,
the confines
but,
of this thing.
But the point being of it is that you have wise things and unwise things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you show up to a domestic dispute, it's not just left or right. This is how I handle the situation.
Yeah, it's not a 1 and a 0.
I have to deal with how this person, what's the situation,
Yeah.
circumstances. Like back to my point, grace and mercy. How
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
gracious and merciful am I going to deal with these people or not? And so you're asking, could we build a machine,
And-
a Christian AI that would have God?
Yes.
So that's the question: can you build a machine ever, like a computer ever, that would know the wisdom of God?
That's what I'm asking. And is it that's the ultimate question because
40 minutes later, we've got the question.
Yes, that's the question. That's what I mean by Christian AI.
Yeah.
And what you would do then, if you were to do that, you would have to have this morality that's programmed into it that doesn't
Well, it's-
stop
no,
at
no,
human
no, stop.
institutions,
Oh,
but
yeah.
can reason all the way
Right, I
to
was
the
gonna say,
point
it's
where
not
like
just-
it's going WWJD.
Right, exactly.
Like what would Jesus do?
Exactly. You want to create a Christian
that's
AI
what I
that knows
mean.
what WWJD is. Now it's the answer.
That's where the beauty comes in.
I mean,
Don't worry, we'll solve that
let's
in the
think-
next one.
Let's think about this. Well, so my boss at work, actually, a great guy. One of the inspiring quotes that he's given me is knowing the right question to ask is half of the answer.
Yes.
So I feel like we just walked to, okay, we know the question to ask.
Yeah.
Like
We program a machine with the wisdom of-
Because like you're like, oh, I'm creating
yeah.
Christian AI. Everyone's like, well, what the heck does that mean? Right. So
Yeah.
now we're like, I want to create some semblance of sentient.
Yeah,
well, not
extended-
sentient,
what-
but like
it would be extended
self-thinking
consciousness.
Yeah,
or
extended consciousness.
extended intelligence
Yes.
ultimately.
Yeah, well, extended. You want to extend? Yeah. Can you create a machine with extended consciousness that can know the wisdom of God?
Yeah. And could
I think the answer is no.
yeah. And
I think you.
so,
So you're saying yeah.
what-
So you want to do it? You're agreeing the answer is no.
I think I don't have a lot to back this up. I'm just gonna preface that.
At least it's on
but,
the table.
but
I don't have a lot to back this.
But I would like to think, in a hopeful sense, that that's possible, even if it means that the way in which God's wisdom is programmed is not in the full-fledged nature of a complex human being, but that in very specific domains, right? Very, very kind of discrete areas that God's wisdom can be programmed, such as when there's so tax fraud, right? You have the same machine that pulls somebody over for speeding, the same machine that responds to a domestic dispute is not the same machine that does the tax fraud. Now, I don't know if it would be necessary that you make all those same machines the same one thing, but I'd be curious if you could make different machines with a kind of like implemented in such a manner as they reflect the morality of God.
Well, but hold on, but that's my point though. It's not just morality. Like the
Yeah.
domestic dispute situation is not a matter of morality.
I
there's
say-
a matter of morality going on, like don't
Yeah.
assault your wife, all this other type of stuff. There's a matter of morality going on. But when you show up to deal with the situation, the way in which you deal with it requires wisdom, and that's
Yes.
not like more.
Well,
and here's
I tie morality into wisdom in a lot of ways. That
I'm
using that kind of synonymously.
yeah, but that's what I'm saying. I don't know that you can say that.
When I say morality, I say the moral, the
No,
complexity of moral
because
choices.
the
complexity of moral choices, right? Like
No,
sometimes
but that's what I'm saying, right? So
Yeah.
back to like the Jesus and the violence thing, right?
Sure.
Or you live by the sword, you die by the sword.
Yep.
He's not saying that if you use the sword, it's sinful.
Okay.
He's saying that there's situations where you need to be discerning and decide if I should use the
Okay.
sword or not.
Yeah.
Same thing with an officer that shows up to a domestic dispute or whatever.
Yeah.
He
They have to be able to discern. It's discernment.
If I need to
ultimately.
discern, do I need to pull my weapon right now?
So-
Do I need to discern also? And
Yeah.
right. So point being is like, I think you're asking about. I'm trying to understand myself. Do I believe is wisdom? It's not a matter of morality in that situation. It's a matter of what's the
Discernment.
right. What's
It's a matter
the
of
best,
discernment.
What's the best
That's-
thing? And that's what I'm saying. It's not.
That's
more,
why Paul's
it's-
exhortation to Christians is that they may grow up to be able to discern the perfect and pleasing.
Right. No, but
will
so
of
now we have
God.
to ask the question: I think we have to ask the question then. How do you define wisdom and discernment from a biblical perspective? Like, what is like? How can you?
Oh, this is great because then we go to what is the nature of godly, wholesome knowledge.
Okay, hold on. Yeah, sorry, I'm thinking while
Yeah.
I'm listening. You
Yeah,
said-
yeah.
We've
No,
got a
no,
big
that's
question.
good.
We got a
Go
big
for it.
question here.
Go for it.
So when it back to I like the Jesus says, if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. I think that's a good example because what we are. So I think wisdom and discernment is tethered to morality because
Yeah.
making the discernment, like you said, requires like if I'm speeding past a cop, I'm doing it for a higher purpose.
Yes.
So in order to make a decision, like in making a decision in a moment, right? I am making a moral decision in regards to obedience to God. I am saying, like, again, this is like the
Yeah.
resistance to tyrants is obedience to God. Like, I
Okay.
forget Franklin or whoever said that, right?
Yeah.
So they are arguing that I am being obedient in fighting a tyrant who is operating outside of the bounds of what
That's
God.
that's
what
the
government was-
transcendent ethic is what I mean is when
but that's the thing. It's not an ethic. Like people like ethic is secular morals, right? Like you're saying I could program a machine to resist a tyrant and to know when it should decide to resist a tyrant. I don't think you can do that because that requires a moral obedient judgment between you and God.
Interesting. Okay, so let me ask you this. As it pertains to that particular question, let me ask you this. Do you think that if, under certain circumstances, it's only a matter of conscience that Christians obey or disobey tyrants? Or is it a matter of law? In other words, if I were a Christian under a tyrannical ruler and I did not dissent from that government, would I be in sin? Because
Hold
what
on,
you're saying...
hold on. I think that's a little bit too high of a generalization because, for example, if my government's killing my neighbor and you don't try to stop them, I do believe you're guilty of sin by not trying to love your neighbor and defend them from evil.
That's programmable, though. I could write that in.
How? What? If an authority shows
If
up
authority figures start to threaten this
but-
idea of natural
No, but
rights.
if you're talking, you're trying to say I could build a machine or a RoboCop that would be able to discern that an authority showed up without proper due cause, like the machine.
without proper authority, right?
But that's what I'm saying. Proper authority is dictated by God in His jurisdiction.
That's why you would make the machine's enforcement of law not the authority of the government, but the authority of God, and then you could tailor that machine's enforcement of authority due to its context-dependent government. So there are things that are amoral, like how fast do you drive on the highway? Should you drive on the Autobahn or should you drive 30 miles an hour in a school district, right? Those are going to be, they're arbitrarily defined. There's no reason why it's 30.
No, but hold
why
on.
it's not like
Hold-
35.
back-
But hear me out for a second. So those things are context-dependent. What's not context-dependent, according to God's morality, is that
No. Okay,
thou
good.
shalt not murder.
Yep, agreed. Yep,
Right? That's not context
No,
dependent.
it's-
So you could
yeah.
program that into a machine where it takes non-context dependent ethical statements.
Yeah, okay,
Thou shalt not
Hold on.
murder.
I'm gonna pull in his comment though about errant machines. So
Errant? Okay, so
the
if a
possibility that
machine
you're
errs-
a RoboCop sees what it thinks is a murder occurring, and in fact it was a lawful self-defense, and it shoots the person that was trying to defend themselves because it made an errant decision as regards to the context of the situation.
So you would just have to.
So should we ever create such a machine?
You would have to, if it did it one time.
Yeah, if there's any possibility that a human would be policed by a machine that could err, should we use them?
I think that we use human beings that err all the time in the enforcement of the law.
But those are moral beings.
Okay. Who are culpable for their behavior.
They're culpable for
this is the same question that goes in. Should we ever even create autonomous vehicles? Because chances are probably high that at least one occurrence is going to happen where a machine is going to have to make a decision either to kill the driver or another human being.
Yep.
And should we even create them? Because then the culpability lands on the machine and ultimately the programmers of the machine.
This gets super deep.
Yeah. So should we ever even do that?
I want to make sure we don't do. Yeah. So I want to make sure we don't derail too far from where we were.
But
so
I think it's
valid.
It's the same question, because what you're asking is, if we
it's a separate line. Right? I took off with this errant argument, but we were debating
if a machine makes an error.
No,
right?
no. What we were debating though was a machine's ability to discern the proper moral thing to do in a situation that's not obvious, right? So back to like resisting tyrants or the neighbor thing, like a machine shows up and you're saying like you think that you could program a machine to show up and in a scenario that is not explicitly moral, make the right decision.
And this is why I said I don't know a lot to back this up. is that I would like to think that, and it's a hopeful goal to move towards.
Okay,
because if anything, it teaches us.
So
I think it's a useful thought experiment.
So here's how I would say I think the answer is no.
Okay.
Because take revolution.
Okay.
The idea of revolution, the right of people to resist leaders, authorities.
We might disagree on this, but it's okay.
Well, if we're gonna disagree, it might not be the appropriate analogy. Although we maybe just discussing that idea in disagreement. But it's deep, so maybe it's gonna detract us too much.
Let's focus on this, and I'll just we don't even got to get nuanced with it. So the right of people to revolt is your line of argument.
Yeah,
right?
My line of argument is that the right of people is not. Well, here's the thing. I would say it's not a right; it's a duty. I think it's the duty of people to resist a government that's tyrannical. Because God instituted government for a certain.
But the question earlier: would it be a sin if a Christian did not rebel?
Right. So So I think. So yeah.
Where do you draw the line?
So hold on, my brain's just catching back up to where we're at. So here's the question. In terms of sinfulness and punishing sin, right? Because what you're really asking is it punishable, right? Well, let me clarify. Are you saying that a Christian or somebody not participating in the resistance of their government should be something that's punishable, or is it sin?
I'm asking you the question.
No, because I think it's important.
Yeah.
Because if I don't stop if I see somebody getting attacked out on the street and I don't get involved before authority and before the church, I'm not guilty of anything.
Sure.
But before God, I'm guilty because I didn't try to love my neighbor.
Perhaps, yeah.
So it's sinful, but it's not temporally punishibly sinful.
I understand.
So what you're asking,
I'm asking sinful before God.
In my mind,
I'm asking sinful before God, before that ethical system, before the ethical system set forth.
I would say before God, you should be fearful that you are in sin if you do not participate in the just, warranted revolution against the government.
And I would say that,
and I'm saying that's a matter of God's jurisdiction. I'm not saying that I have a law to say that. I'm saying it's a matter of God's jurisdiction, right? Positive law: honor your neighbor, love your neighbor, right? Did I love my neighbors enough today? Mm-hmm. Who determines that?
Sure,
God does. God knows the answer is no, of course not. Like I didn't do it.
Well, not of course, but it's possibly the case that that's true.
Right. But no one around here makes that decision. So my argument would be that in regards to if someone does not revolt against the government, that's really a matter of God's jurisdiction. I can't stand there and say you're in sin for not doing this, like in terms of like a punishable sin. But you are in sin if you know the right thing to do it and you don't do it.
I'm 100%.
So if there's a line of argument that there's a theological line of argument that resistance to government is a duty.
What I would say then, if that's truly the case, then we should also is that enforceable by churches? Because churches are supposed to.
No, I would say the answer is no. I think the church should be in fear before God if they do not properly participate.
Okay,
God chastens and disciplines His church, and that's under His jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Right. And so I would appeal absolutely to a church and say, if it is your duty as a Christian to teach liberty, justice, rule of law, proper use of the authorities, the whole 9 yards, and you guys are the ones who are supposed to know God and bring those things to your neighbor.
Yeah.
And if there's a situation in which those are falling away, those
Yeah.
ideas that God wants to bring to your neighbor are being threatened.
If
by
you're not
government,
upholding that, it's
then
the sins of
then
commission
you
versus
should-
omission.
then
If
you
you're
should-
omitting your duty to your neighbor to love them, or you're
exactly.
omitting your
You don't-
right
right.
to
So I think
help.
if you fail in your duty, which I think honestly this is a message for the Western church right now.
Yeah.
If you're failing in your duty, you are sinning before God.
Now,
You are under God's jurisdiction, and you are in sin.
what is the metric by which you define my duty?
I don't know that there is a metric. That's my point. It's faith, right? It's knowing God.
Context dependent.
It's
context
well,
dependent.
it's right because here's you asked a question about conscience, right? I think at one point, like, is it against?
Is it a matter of conscience,
'cause-
whether or not,
'cause
this is what I
here's-
wanted to ask you
well-
the question about. Is it a matter of conscience, right? So say you're in America in 1769, right? And you feel a swelling tide sweeping through the colonies that says something's going to pop off, right?
Yep.
Things are happening,
Yep.
right? And you got to make a decision. Are you going to be a loyalist or are you going to rebel?
Right.
And you have to ask yourself the question as a Christian, right? Whether your duty is to uphold Romans 13, namely to obey the authorities that are currently instituted, namely the authorities that the colonies were originally established in, the authority of
The colonies were not established under an authority.
the colonies were established under the authority of Britain. Were they not?
No.
Okay.
They were not established under the authority of
Follow my reasoning then. If perhaps
the
follow my reasoning as a thought
Well,
experiment.
yeah.
Perhaps if the historical details are a little bit off. So if you're
Can you just make the statement about the conscience, right? What is the statement?
Yes. So, and it's a helpful thought experiment nonetheless, but it's just that if you're in that situation and circumstance,
Yep.
is it a matter of conscience, whether you choose to be a loyalist or to revolt, or is it a matter of duty that you be a loyalist or revolt? Is it a matter of Romans 13, or is it a matter of I ought to rebel against a tyrant and in doing so obey God?
Say it again. Just say it again.
Okay. Is it a matter of conscience
Yep.
that I rebel or be a loyalist? Right. So I'm free to pick either as a Christian. It's lawful for me to pick either to be a loyalist or it's lawful for me to pick to be a revolutionary. Right. It's lawful for either, but it comes down to a matter of conscience. Or is it a matter of duty? Right. Like a law for me to be a rebel in that situation, or is it a matter of law for me to be a loyalist in that situation?
Right. Well, and what I'm going back to in my mind right now is the 1 Corinthians verses in regards to what conscience was, right? And so, a violation of conscience is somebody doing something that is not sinful, but
Sure.
in their conscience they think is sinful.
Sure.
So I'm just trying to properly extend that to
Yeah,
this
yeah.
thought
So
experiment.
perhaps it's the case that you could either be a loyalist or you could either be a
because I would
revolutionary.
argue
You would argue
I would
that you
argue,
have to be a revolutionary.
I would
think, in
argue that the
context.
proper appeal before God is that yes, you should be a revolutionary.
You should, yeah.
Yes.
And that's a moral imperative, right?
I don't know what that word. I guess.
A moral imperative is like an imperative is like give me that cup, right? It tells you to do something. A moral imperative is it's something from God that tells us what to do.
It's the same thing like honor your father and mother. It's literally one of the 10
tells you to do that.
It's the 10 commandments. It's a positive
yeah.
law.
Okay.
Do we have punishment in the church for
I
not
think-
honoring your father and mother?
Huh?
No, the answer is no, we don't. You cannot
well,
be church disciplined for not honoring your father and mother.
I don't know about that. I think that are you saying that in all of church history, there's never been one case where somebody has not been?
I'm not saying
been
whether, I'm not saying
disciplined?
whether the church has done it. I'm saying whether or not it is something that is enforceable by a church or authority.
I think it is enforceable.
No, because it is the church's. First of all, the family is not the church's jurisdiction.
If you don't care for your own household, you're worse off than an unbeliever. Paul said that as a commandment and an encouragement
But
to Timothy.
why don't we have laws then that say if you don't pay for your poor family members?
We've gone over this before, I think, one time. Like we got real deep into.
Well, the
certain
point of my
kinds of
argument
laws,
is that
yeah.
honor your father and mother. It is a duty. It is a law,
Sure.
but it is a duty. Or say for example, take care of the poor, right?
Sure.
Give alms to the poor, right? But we don't have laws that say you didn't give enough alms this year.
Sure.
Do you get church disciplined for not having given enough alms?
You should, according
No,
to
no, that-
Corinthians.
no,
yeah, it
no,
says
it
says
doesn't-
that
it
do
do-
not even eat with the greedy person. If somebody acts in greed,
No,
then
I
they are to
said
be disciplined
enough
by the
alms.
church.
I didn't say no alms.
Sure.
I said enough alms.
That's
Like,
a different.
how did-
Yeah.
that's
I get
I'm
what you're saying now.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not. If someone says no, I don't think we're supposed to give to the poor. You're like, well, no, that's wrong. That's
Yeah.
Right? And if you're going to commit to that realistically
Yeah.
in church discipline, if you're going to commit to that idea,
So
and
do
not
you
give
think
the
it's
poor,
yeah.
then it would be a matter of sin that could be punishable.
So is it a
Because-
matter of sin for me to not be an American revolutionary? Would it have been a matter of sin for me to be a loyalist? Because you said it that we ought to revolt, right? That we should do it.
I said that I don't remember exactly the words, but yes, I did. I said that.
They
I said
should,
thought we ought to. Yeah,
revolt.
no, no.
That's the duty to loving your neighbor.
And I'm just thinking, was it contextualized about resisting a tyrant, or was it? And I don't know that the question matters.
Yeah.
I'm trying to frame my thoughts here.
Is
it a matter of sin if you chose to be if you were a Christian and loyalist?
Yeah.
I would say. I'm thinking.
Yeah. It's a hard question. I don't know if I've come down on a hard line one way or the other, but I think it's an interesting question.
It's a very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I want to say yes. I know I want to say yes, but I don't want to say yes without being able to actually
explain why.
Explain yes,
yeah.
and well,
you can say you're intuitively leaning towards yes, but you may not understand completely why.
Well, I think there's more than that. I'm just trying to put it together.
Sure.
Because there is the idea, like duty, like again, it goes no. So yeah, sorry, I think I got it. So I got the thought train at least, right? So it goes back to if you see your neighbor getting murdered, and you don't try to stop them, you did not commit a sin in regards to the 10 Commandments.
Sure.
But you did commit a sin of not doing your duty to your neighbor, and therefore, I do believe I'll say this: I do believe that you are in sin if you don't do your duties. Now again, this is why positive versus negative law is so important.
Yeah.
Positive law. We all fail. God says, like, if we all did exactly what God said we should do all the time, there would be no problems on this planet, right?
Okay.
We would be in heaven.
Yeah.
That's going to be heaven, where everyone is perfectly obedient to God. So in the positive aspects of the law, we all fail all the time. And we are covered in grace and mercy for that. And they are under God's jurisdiction, right? God relents and shows mercy and, like, deals with us gracefully and whatnot. And those are under his jurisdiction. Sinfulness in regards to breaking negative law, don't murder somebody, that's punishable.
Okay.
Right, that's punishable. So in regards to, is it sin to not do your duty? The answer is yes. But it's not sin in the aspect of you can be punishable under the law.
Okay. Yeah,
right?
I understand what you're saying. But it's a sin before God.
But it is sin before God.
Okay.
So that I would
in that context,
I would say
then,
yes. So
you
now
would say
we're
that
extending.
a revolutionary, you must be a revolutionary, otherwise you're in sin.
So
before God.
I would say if the revolution is just.
Okay.
If it is a just revolution,
yeah,
if
now
it's
you
a
got
just revolution, and you don't participate, then yes, I would say before God you are in sin.
Okay. And I think that there is a can of worms of complexity.
Yes.
Where you say, what constitutes a just revolution?
This is why we tie it all back to the AI stuff.
Yes,
because this is why I was going to.
How do you discern that? How do you program the discernibility of that?
I do it with exactly.
And here's what I think, and perhaps it's there's a part of me that likes to think in this category, with giving respect to the fact that, of course, I believe that the Holy Spirit is going to influence our decisions and our ability to reason and come to things, right? So I'm not purely materialist in my understanding of how we reason.
Yep.
So whereas a computer will never have access to the Holy Spirit.
Never
and
have
that's
access.
the complexity
Although
and difficulty.
God controls all things, so he could be like electrons in that machine.
Yeah. Dude, inspired machines, man. Inspired machines.
We have to have the laying of hands on
That's a
of
band,
machines.
dude. That's a band name right there. Inspired Machines. Make some sick techno music.
Exactly. Because I believe that the answer could be in regards to not being a revolutionary.
Yeah.
It would be sin. Because before God, there may be a just cause and it may be your duty, but that is between you and God. That is a heart.
So that's a conscience thing then. That's not a moral thing. That's not a duty thing.
No.
It's a conscience. That's not a duty.
No. Okay. Now let's finish that argument. Hold on.
Here's my reasoning. So
I gotta hold the thoughts in my head before I can reason with you.
All right.
So I haven't brought those two together yet. So I'm saying yes, I do believe you have a duty to God to do certain things, and when we fail, it is sin.
Yep.
And so consciousness is doing something which you are at liberty to do, but you think is sin. So that's why I would say no, it is not a matter of conscience, because I am saying that I am saying you are in sin if you don't do this thing versus you are at liberty to do this thing and you think it's sin.
Well,
I'm saying rebelling to tyrants is not a matter of a liberty.
I'm leaning towards
it is a command.
It's a matter of conscience.
Well,
I'm leaning towards that because.
So hold on. Let me just make sure I say that. I do believe it's a matter of liberty in regards to liberty is perfectly obeying God.
Okay.
So I do believe that you, in regards to liberty in that sense, or that hermeneutics of liberty, being that liberty is obedience to God, for perfect, basically. It's being in the gospel. is the perfect law of liberty. But that frees you to obey God.
So
living at liberty means that you are harmonizing with the will of God.
yes, yeah. And those who are free are those whom Christ has set free. Truly,
right? Exactly. So, in regards to in regards to the revolution, in rebellion to tyrants and whatnot,
and we're talking about human tyrants.
You do not get to claim. I do not. You do not get to claim that not doing your duty is a matter of conscience.
So, and this is, I think, the can of worms of complexity, right? Because we have to ask the question, and there's multiple questions here. One is going to be, what then is my duty toward the instituted authorities? Is my duty to keep them in check, right? For them to make sure that they uphold Romans 13, being a terror to evildoers?
Yep.
Is that my responsibility as a citizen?
Yep.
Or is my responsibility as defined in Romans 13 as an alternate interpretation, something like my duty to governmental authorities is to submit and obey them as God instituted them, with the clause and the asterisks. I got this one from R.C. Sproul, that we are to obey the government when it does not forbid anything that God commands, and we are to dissent from the government when it forbids that which God commands.
Right. So what I would argue is missing from that theological interpretation is covenant theology between God and his people and a ruler and his people.
Okay. I don't know if
because
that's a can of worms that I don't even know if I can go down right now.
But I think that is why those alternate interpretations of Romans 13 exist, because they do not consider the
covenant
role
theology,
the role relation between
role,
God, his people, and the ruler and his people. Because, for example, we have a constitution. We have a covenant between our leader and us, the people in this country. We were founded on the idea of self-government, and that our rulers are supposed to uphold that, inalienable rights, all the things that are supposed to be protected for a person. So therefore, it is their duty, is their job between us and the people. That was the covenant that says this is what you're supposed to do. This is how you're supposed to act. And so that is a covenant theology. And so they are in violation of that.
Yeah.
And so in that regards, they were instituted to be a terror to evildoers. They were instituted to be a terror to evildoers, and there was a relationship established between the people and them which they are supposed to act a certain way.
Okay. So in founding the United States, the Constitution states that there is a kind of covenant between the rulers of the United States and the American people. Now, if those rulers
well, I don't know if the Constitution actually says that part, but whatever.
Well, that's what you're implying, right? Just roll with it for a second.
The Declaration of Independence speaks to that nature. Nature's God, inalienable rights, all these things.
Roll with this reasoning for a second, right?
Rolling.
That there is an agreement made between a ruler and his people.
Yep.
And that agreement constitutes all of the responsibilities that the ruler has to the people and all the responsibilities the people have to the ruler.
Sure.
Okay? Now, you would say that when a ruler kind of does not fulfill their end of the promises, then the people are no longer obligated to fulfill their end of the promises, right? The covenant's been broken. They have the right to dissent.
Well, no, and this is where we get back to the whole machines making decisions things, because that's the question. The Declaration lays it out after a long train of abuses.
Sure.
And they said after at some point in time, like for example, if the leaders of our country violate technically the Constitution in some certain way, then we don't, like one way, just say something happens that technically was a constitutional violation. We don't overthrow the government because they did one thing wrong, right? It's not a matter of
Isn't it our duty to do that though?
I said, right.
So where do you draw the line? Is it 2? Is it 3? Is it 5? Is it 10?
That's my point. That's my question. How do you know? And this is where I would argue that
you're saying that it's sin if somebody doesn't fulfill their duty to revolt against a government, yet we don't have a fine line with which we can even define that sin.
It's a sin. Back to negative positive law. We don't have a defined line to defend how many alms you should give to your neighbor. It's God's jurisdiction.
It's at least a tithe, right?
But that's not your neighbor. That's your church.
What was it?
Okay,
it was
but
at least a tithe.
Honor your father and mother. We don't have a line in the sand of what that looks like. Other than not assaulting them, which is violating negative law.
Yeah. How did the Jewish law talk about how we are to engage with our mother and father? That'd be an interesting study.
I'm just saying, there are laws that God has given us. Do this, don't do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. That don't have fine lines.
Yeah. So perhaps and that's to bring this all back to the AI thing, though.
Yeah.
Right. To pull this, to roll this all the way. I knew this is what was going to happen, and I love this, man. I love how we can go from like artificial intelligence and machines to the American Revolution. Like 3 great topics, right? American Revolution, artificial intelligence, and the Decalogue. Like, just weave them all together.
Right.
But to bring this way back
to bring it back to that,
the complexity of discerning
Yes.
what the positive duties of a machine are.
Yep.
as it relates to God's law,
You're saying I want to program that.
You're saying it's non-programmable.
Yep.
I'm saying perhaps it is.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't,
Exactly.
and that's why I prefaced it.
Because
With, I don't have anything
you're
to
basically
support
saying
this.
that I could program a machine to make a decision with God that it's time to overthrow a government.
And that's why I said I don't have anything to back this up with.
No, I know. I'm not attacking you for having the idea.
yeah.
I think it's look at this conversation that came from this. I'm just saying that would be my.
It's a useful thought experiment
Right.
in trying to determine then, okay, so if we can't program it into a machine, what is it that enables human beings to act in that manner? Is it discernment from the Holy Spirit? Is it divine revelation? Is it inspiration?
It's a spiritual connection.
Yeah. Okay. So then we have to. That's fine.
Hold on. Let me. Ooh, this is interesting. This is really interesting.
Yeah. This is.
Sorry, I just want to pause. Are you doing good? Everyone doing good?
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right. I just want to make sure because I couldn't keep going right now. So
Probably
here's
wrap it
go
up
for it.
eventually. But
what was that?
wrap it up eventually.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So here's a really interesting experiment. A lot of the founding fathers in the revolution were deists, not Christians.
Oh yeah.
So they did not buy, if that's correct, like if they were unsaved,
yep.
if they were unsaved truly, then they did not have the Spirit.
Okay.
So this gets in a little into common grace as well, too, right? So point me. What I was going to say, what I was going to,
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
going to say is that people
Oh,
that are
man.
not spiritual, who are not communing with the
How
Lord,
can they come to wisdom?
they're yes, like Benjamin Franklin, for example, he on his deathbed said that there is no better system of morals for government of a people than those of Jesus Christ. Like he literally believes in the morals of Jesus Christ. Benjamin Franklin practiced chastity, all these types of things, but also said, "I do not know about this business of him as God
Like
or whatever."
Lord of all,
Ex-
resurrection,
exactly.
miracles.
But recognized the value, and I can get into I think how all these deists in the
So-
revolution ended up there because of natural law and stuff like that.
So-
but point being is they if I'm sitting here making my argument that well you can't program this in because you need the Spirit
Yet
connection.
a government was founded by people that may not have had that
Well-
clearly defined intimate connection with the Holy Spirit
here's where
dwelling in them.
It's more nuanced than that though, because like those couple of those big deist leaders
Mm-hmm.
were a minor few of the actual people that actually signed the Constitution.
Sure.
There was actually a ton of Christians. You had the Black Robe Regiment. You had preachers in the American Revolution
So
preaching stuff.
this is where we go into, I think, some of the nature of intelligence, right? Where we say
Yes.
intelligence does not exist in one sole entity that is able to know all things and act in a manner that is perfect. But instead, and we even talk about this in the church, the necessity for there to be different roles played, and iron sharpens iron, right?
Yep.
The very fact that our consciousness does not just exist like 1 + 1, but that we mutually complement one another to help each other come to better conclusions, right?
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps you could program into machines various ways of looking at
Yeah,
the
but
world
so-
that through their
Okay.
kind of synthetic understanding
Right.
that they're able to then come to the best possible conclusion that then gets
Okay.
okayed by a judge.
So what's wrong with this argument? Because this is where I was going.
Yeah.
So here, the way in which most of these founders arrived at what I would also argue
Mm-hmm.
are deeply biblical principles is that they were coming through these, especially not the actual Enlightenment, but in the
Yeah.
1600s, these arguments over natural law and reasoning from nature about God.
Okay.
That is why the Declaration mentions nature
Yeah.
and nature is God. So like there were literally debates about whether or not you can look out at nature and be like
and
polygamy is
feel the yeah,
no,
yeah.
or it'd be like, is polygamy a sin? like does I can argue you can
Yeah,
look
yeah.
out at nature and know that homosexuality is a sin
Okay.
because it is against nature. Like nature, a species cannot exist and reproduce if it is homo.
Well,
if it's
we got into this the other day.
Along those lines of argument. So what they did is
Yeah.
they, through reasoning, looked out at nature and said, like, by the idea of creation and design, they admitted a God.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's interesting. So it was contingent. They were deists. They did.
They
believe,
had presupposed a transcendent ethic. And they presupposed a transcendent ethic and authority. And from that,
yes.
using the Bible, they were come to various conclusions, even apart from what we would consider a direct relationship with the Holy Spirit. Now, we can say that God worked with a common grace there, right?
Right, exactly.
That's totally true.
Yeah.
But it's also the case that he did not work with a very particular divine grace in their
Yes,
regeneration.
in the regeneration.
So
Yep.
unregenerate people
Right.
that were able to presuppose very wise things
Yes,
like
exactly.
the validity of the Bible
Yep.
and the existence of God, were able to come to very useful conclusions.
Yep.
I wonder if
Yep.
it's possible then to develop deist machines, right? That'd be
Well, so what you're saying though is you want to be able to create. Can you create a machine that could reason about the fact that we exist
with certain presuppositions associated with it.
there would have to
That's
be.
that's what I'm that's what I'm saying.
there
That's why I
would
say
have to
Christian
be.
AI
Yeah,
because
yeah,
I think
yeah,
of like
yep,
presupposing this transcendent ethic.
Because you're like, hey,
validating-
machine, God exists.
Yeah. This is.
You know that. That is true. We are telling you that is true.
I don't quite know how you'd represent that in Java, but we can. Semicolon. Print God.
Next discussion: how to program the existence
All
of
right.
God in a machine.
Now we gotta get practical.
Now we gotta get practical.
Don't quite know how Java works for that one.
Maybe it's Python. I don't know. Python's like you do
Layers.
No, you do import God.
It's just real long.
Python and Java for people listening
Yeah,
are
yeah.
programming languages,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there is a lot of nuance. Anyway,
Oh man, that'd be funny.
no, but so
But
that okay. So if you take that as your premise, that if I could have a set of presuppositions, so the real question I think we're asking now is can you create? This is really interesting. Can you create? How do I ask this question? If I created an AI, if I created an AI and told it that God exists, and then it doesn't arrive at the proper conclusions, right?
You presuppose the wrong God.
Well, right, because like the argument by natural law in theory would be that like, okay, God exists, we are all created by God, and therefore these inalienable rights God gave to us because He created us, and that is where James 1:25 is so big for me. Is James 1:25 says God's law, His perfect law is liberty.
Yeah.
God created us to live at liberty, perfectly in unity and harmony with Him.
Yeah.
And we were given, we should have been able, we were created with the ability to self-govern and do so.
So
Now, in 1 Samuel 8, the people throw him away. They
Yep.
throw God away. They say, "Give us a king, not you."
Yeah.
And so that is the people choosing to live under tyranny and authority, basically.
Yeah.
Well, I can't say tyranny, but authority.
it's like the machine gets corrupted. It's like oh no, and then there's like a robot Jesus that comes. Oh man.
Right, but so point being, so would you have to? I guess the question is how much presupposition do you have to put in there?
That's what I
Because
think.
like, are you trying to create an AI that could end up at the proper reason of truth, which we know? We know truth. We know that if you know there's a God, you were created in His image, and then like these things, and because you were created by God, you were given these rights.
Yeah.
In being created, does a machine have to be told that as a presupposition, or would it be able to reason to?
So, and this is what I would be curious to. In the same way, you could create a kind of like computer program. You test it, right? You see whether it completes the task that you set out to program it for. And if
Hold on, sorry. This is at 3 hours. You said it's still going, but you said it only has 3 hours or something.
we got 30 minutes.
Okay.
Well,
We'll
begin to
definitely
wrap
wrap
this
it
up.
up.
So the question becomes, you can program, a given computer program is eventually tested. So what you could do is something like, you make all these presuppositions, you add all this machine language, right? And then you see what the conclusions it comes to.
Right.
And you then test and retest to figure out how tweaking some of the presuppositions, making more clear, making more nuanced, making different, right? All these things were until you got the given result that you were looking for. And
Now the question is,
and then it would be you'd obviously have then the
ooh, this is at such war though with secular society though.
Sure. And I think that would be really funny is if it came to all these conclusions and then like print Summa Theologica and it
What is Summa Theologica?
Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica, it like prints out this real intense like natural reason about God and all of his attributes and characteristics and then redemption and all these things, and you just like presuppose like natural revelation and general revelation, and it comes to all these conclusions about the nature of God and all these things. But I'm legitimately curious about this because yes, the implication would arise as to say you ran the computer program. What if it just like, what if you never get an end result, right? Like, it just runs forever.
It would have to be hosted in Iceland.
Yeah.
Geothermal.
Oh my god,
power.
Yeah.
I don't know. Well, okay. So I mean, I feel like I've arrived, at least to try to wrap this up. I feel like I've arrived at the. Do I have enough to say that I feel like it could be possible?
It's useful to think about at least.
Because I'm asking if everything that we just brought up, does that still solve that domestic dispute situation? Like, is what we just talked about enough to be able to create an AI that would be able to show up to a domestic dispute situation and make a call of discernment
Yeah.
I don't know that I can say that because I think
This is what I mean by
I think you could create something that would do pretty good.
That's what I mean. Yeah. All right,
Is that enough?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I think what I enjoy out of this is like, it's like, well,
Yeah.
I have nothing to support this, but
Right.
I guess it's possible.
But like you said, the thought of experiment of this is so important because regardless of how it went down the first time,
Yeah.
right, in regards to the American Revolution and stuff like that, if what they did was valid, I think that's an important question.
Yeah,
to ask.
yeah.
Like we have to ask.
That's a totally. I would love to do that conversation.
The validity,
Yeah.
the validity, the duty, all these types of things, right? Because we are, say, on the cusp of heading in the direction of seeing a lot of authoritarian control take
Yeah,
over,
yeah.
progression in a way that seems bad from a government perspective.
Yep.
And so understanding that if there is a just cause for revolution,
Yes.
what is the wisdom or discernment necessary to make that cause?
Yeah.
Or to initiate that, I think becomes way more important.
Yeah, yeah.
and
What are
so-
the means by which we as human beings are going to come to that conclusion? Because if
right.
we're trying to program this onto a machine, we ourselves should know how to be able to do it.
Because what I would argue is like at least right now, just like the Declaration of Independence, there is a long list of grievances that we could make right now against how the idea of liberty, inalienable rights, limited government, all this type of stuff has been utterly perverted and violated in this country.
Sure.
So that's different than the revolution. The revolution was like, hey, this government is using the Bible to declare a nation church and all sorts of stuff. That's why the Puritans came over here, blah, blah, blah. The British, they claim, or the English, taxation was a big deal. Jazz, not representation. Ours looks different now, but to me, it appears that we are on the cusp of at least having that list of grievances.
Sure.
So the question becomes, at what point, what do you do, and what do you do?
I exercise my First Amendment right and gather in peaceful protests and petition my government for redress of grievances.
Right, but what does that mean? What I'm asking, what does that look like? And what does that mean?
I think that is a conversation that is for another day.
For sure. No, exactly. But everything, this whole thought experiment runs to up to that.
Up to that point, which
Yeah.
is ultimately we get to the point where discernment, right? That's really what we're trying to get to, because it's easy to program.
Because there is no line. If that is the
do's
correct,
and do nots
Yes.
are easy. Those are like ones and zeros.
Yep.
But when it comes to discerning how one is to live and act in the
Right.
world,
And this-
given those
and
and
the
the principles,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
That's where the complexity emerges. But we as Christians, right? And many people do this with even secular worldviews or worldviews that suppose a deist God, right? They still are able to discern how they ought to behave,
Yep.
even given complex situations, right?
Yep.
So what are and this is my leaning towards like brain science, right? I'm like, what are the cognitive capacities that allow human beings to be able to do that, right? To be able to reason in these ways, to kind of blend all these various propositions and come to a conclusion of like, I don't shoot this person in this given situation, right? When in a different one I might have, or in the other one it might be more clear, right? Like, what is it that lends itself to that?
But is there a sufficiency in simply defining it the way you did, or does it require the moral, spiritual component?
I think that's an interesting question.
Yep. And I'll just throw this to you as a conclusion statement as well, like in regards to the whole aspect of duty, right?
Yeah.
Which was that consciousness, which we started out with the alcohol discussion,
Yeah.
all the way up to duty and whatnot. I think this is something that we should seriously be discussing as the church right now, because I think that it is the proper understood response to a lot of what we see going around us is that the church has been not understanding its duties and understand like it was a provocative idea for me to sit here and say that I think you would be in sin to not participate in a revolution against
I don't know if I agree with that.
I'm not saying that you do, but I'm saying in that
it would be an interesting thought experiment.
But what I am saying is that you are in sin if you don't do your duty.
Yeah.
And
I think everybody can agree with that. It's just how we define duty.
Correct. Well, yeah, is that yeah. Probably. That's probably the right way to say that. I mean, you know what? I can't say that because I know Christians who would say that if I see my neighbor getting murdered, as long as I don't participate in that murder, then that was the right thing.
Sure. Well, we would just say that maybe that's a faulty definition.
Or no, I would say that you don't understand your duty.
Yeah. They got a bad definition of duty.
Right.
Right. So I think that's the conclusion we came to is that how do we define discernment, and it's really an ethical question ultimately, and that's what I wanted to get at with Christian AI is what is the relationship between computation, which is ultimately what computers do.
Yep.
Right, they're an extension of human reason.
Yep.
But ethics too. How would you?
I don't like the
combine
word
these two?
ethics because in my mind, ethics are secular morals. But
Okay, yeah. No. I think of ethics as just the study of what is right and what is wrong.
right, but
Do's and don'ts.
that's morality.
Okay, morality.
There is no such thing as right and wrong outside of morality.
Okay. Ethics.
We gotta stop.
One quick interesting
We
note
gotta
though. Ethics is just Greek for it comes from ethikos, which is habit.
Well, then that. Right, but most
an
people, like
interesting-
I've been in debates with people like that are secular libertarians, and they talk about, well, no, we're not supposed to be about morality, but we're supposed to have these agreed upon human ethics and whatnot. I'm like, your entire
it's
like you cannot understand the idea of right and wrong, which apparently
Yeah.
if he's using the word ethics or these individuals use the word ethics, they're actually maybe misusing.
I think of morality and ethics as the exact same word almost.
Me,
but perhaps
I do too. I would
Perhaps
too,
there's a
yeah.
distinction there that I'm not aware of. But nonetheless, it seems like that was ultimately what I meant by Christian AI. I wanted to see what emerged from the interaction between these two concepts. And I think it's been super cool
been
to talk
interesting.
about that.
It's been-
Interesting.
It's been good, man.
Interesting.
All right, well, until next time.
Yes. All right.